The air in the grimy London basement was thick with the smell of sulfur, ozone, and John Constantine's own stale cigarette smoke. He stood in the center of a hastily drawn chalk circle, runes and sigils pulsing with a faint, angry light. Before him, a pillar of green, noxious fire roared, and within it, the bound form of Nergal, a duke of hell, thrashed and cursed in a language that predated human speech. "All right, you filthy bugger," John muttered, taking a long drag from his silk cut. "The deal's off. You took the kid's soul. You didn't hold up your end of the bargain, so it's back into the pit for you. No refunds." He raised his hands to speak the final words of the banishment. But Nergal, in a final, desperate act of spite, roared. The demon lunged, not at John, but at the circle itself. Its claws tore through a critical rune, shattering the containment. The ritual didn't just fail. It inverted. The green fire exploded outward, and a force like a vacuum seized John. He felt the demon's non-physical hand close around his very soul. "If I am to be dragged back," the demon shrieked, its voice a chorus of damned souls. "I'm taking you with me, Warlock." John grabbed the amulet around his neck. Oh, bollocks. He was pulled from the basement, from London, from his reality, in a nauseating, bone-jarring tear. The transition was not the familiar, fiery descent he knew. It was a violent, high-speed shunt through a reality that felt wrong. He saw vistas of impossible geometry, landscapes of fused, living metal and weeping, fleshy rock, all under a blood-red sky. This wasn't the fire and brimstone he knew. This wasn't his hell. This was someone else's. He materialized with a wet thud, landing face first in a pool of what he sincerely hoped was just stagnant water, though it smelled like a slaughterhouse. He coughed, spitting out a viscous fluid, and pushed himself to his feet. He was in a vast, cavernous space. The rock walls were black and basalt-like, but they were fused with technology. Great, glowing red cables, thick as a man's torso, snaked through the rock, pulsing with a faint, malevolent energy. The air was hot, sulphurous, and hummed with the sound of distant, industrial machinery. "Right," John said, his voice echoing in the oppressive silence. He patted his trench coat, his heart sinking as he realized his pack of cigarettes was soaked. He pulled one out, saw it was ruined, and tossed it. "This is just perfect. A different bloody dimension, and I'm all out of smokes." He was in hell, but not his hell. And he had a terrible, sinking feeling that the rules here were very, very different. John's survival instincts, honed by a lifetime of running from things far more powerful than himself, took over. He needed to find a defensible position, get his bearings, and figure out what in bloody blazes was going on. He started walking, his footsteps echoing in the vast, techno-flesh corridor. He didn't get far. A screech, high-pitched and animalistic, cut through the hum. From the shadows ahead, figures emerged. They were hunched, vaguely humanoid, with brown, leathery skin, glowing yellow eyes, and sharp, bony protrusions. Imps, but not the cowering, sniveling imps he was used to. These things moved with a fast, predatory grace, their claws clicking on the metal floor. "Right," John muttered, backing away slowly. "Standard procedure." He raised his hand, his mind focusing on the Aramaic incantation for a simple banishment. "By the authority of, well, let's not get picky. By any authority I command you. Begone." A small, faint, blue sigil flared to life in the air between him and the lead imp. The creature paused, its head tilting, as if confused by the strange, flickering light. It seemed annoyed. Then it hurled a ball of roiling, orange fire. John yelped and dove to the side, the fireball exploding against the wall where he'd been standing, showering him with hot shrapnel. "Okay, not a fan of the classics, I see." His magic wasn't working. Or rather, it was working, but it was like trying to speak fluent Latin to a bulldog. The concepts, the authorities, the very rules of his magic had no context here. These demons weren't born of sin and temptation. They seemed to be creatures of pure, simple biological malice. The pack of imps, seeing their prey was unarmed and seemingly harmless, shrieked and charged. "Oh, bugger this for a laugh," John snarled. He turned and ran. He sprinted down the corridor, his trench coat flapping behind him. He was a warlock, a master of the occult, one of the most powerful magicians of his age. And he was being chased by a pack of what looked like angry, fire-throwing monkeys. He vaulted over a pulsing, fleshy growth, skidded around a corner of rusted metal, and ducked into a small, dark maintenance alcove. He held his breath, his heart hammering in his chest, as the imps scrambled past, their claws scraping, their shrieks fading into the distance. He slumped against the wall, pulling out his Zippo, his hands shaking so much it took him 3 tries to light it. He finally managed to find a single, dry cigarette in an inner pocket and lit it, the small flame illuminating his pale, sweating face. He took a long, desperate drag. "Right, John," he whispered to himself, the smoke curling around his face. "New rules, new demons, and your magic's about as useful as a chocolate teapot." He was in a hell where his primary weapons were useless. He was weak, he was mortal, he was, for all intents and purposes, prey, and he was completely, utterly, royally screwed. He stayed in the alcove for what felt like an hour, the adrenaline fading, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He was in a world of monsters, a labyrinth of flesh and steel, and he was nothing but a pack of meat in a trench coat. Then, a voice spoke. It didn't come from the corridor. It spoke inside his head. It was not the familiar, seductive whisper of a demon or the glorious, maddening song of an angel. It was cold, crystalline, utterly logical and utterly devoid of emotion. It sounded synthesized. Thaumaturgical anomaly detected. Unidentified human, non-UAC, present in Sector Gamma. You are in extreme danger. John almost jumped out of his skin. "Who's that? Show yourself, you bloody, whatever you are," he hissed into the darkness. "I am not a physical entity. I am Dr. Samuel Hayden. I am the guiding consciousness of this facility. I have detected your unconventional arrival. Your energy signature is not Argent-based. It is not Hell-based. It is thaumaturgical. You are a warlock." John's blood ran cold. A machine, a consciousness that knew what a warlock was. This was a new level of complicated. "You're one to talk, mate," John muttered, looking at a nearby, sparking terminal. "You're the one who built this bloody abattoir, aren't you? Looks like your science project got a bit out of hand. The situation is complex, but I am offering you an alternative to being torn apart by imps. I can see a path to your survival. And perhaps a path home." That got John's attention. Home, a bath, a pint, a world where demons played by the rules. "I'm listening, Hal. What's the catch?" "I require your unique talents. This facility is overrun, but my objectives remain. There is a corrupted energy conduit nearby, a gore nest that is reinforcing the demonic presence in this sector. The facility's guardian, my primary asset, is indisposed elsewhere. I need you to purify that conduit." "Purify?" John scoffed. "You want me to walk out there and perform an exorcism on a gore nest? Your thaumaturgical skills are your only weapon. This nest is a psychic and biological anchor. Your magic may be the key to neutralizing it in a way conventional force cannot. Do this, and I will provide you with a protected route to a functional slipgate portal, a way back to your own dimension. It is a logical, mutually beneficial transaction." John took another drag from his cigarette. A deal. A deal with a machine god in a biomechanical hell. It was the worst kind of deal, the kind he specialized in. But it was the only deal on the table. "Right," John said, stubbing out his cigarette on the metal floor. "Guide me in, you magnificent, soulless bastard. But if this is a trick, well, you'll just have to find out what a really pissed-off warlock can do to your systems. A logical precaution. Proceed to the main reactor core. I will guide you." A small green light flickered to life on John's battered smartphone, a gift from Hayden displaying a map. John sighed, pulled his trench coat tighter, and stepped out of the alcove, back into the nightmare. Hayden's path was, true to his word, clear. He guided John through maintenance tunnels and forgotten access ways, a route devoid of the demonic patrols. The silence was almost as bad as the screaming, a constant, looming threat. After 20 minutes of winding through corridors of pulsating flesh and humming machinery, he arrived at a vast, cavernous chamber. It was a reactor core, but it was wrong. The central reactor was gone, replaced by a colossal, pulsating thing of flesh, bone, and exposed viscera, lashed to the UAC architecture by thick, black cables and hooked chains. It throbbed with a sickly red light, and the air hummed with a low, agonizing moan, a gore nest. That, John muttered, his face pale with disgust, is a serious case of heresy. That's not just a portal, that's a tumor, a demonic tumor. Your assessment is crude but accurate, Mr. Constantine, Hayden's voice echoed in his head. It is the primary anchor. Purify it, as we discussed. Right, purify it. Not just poke it with a stick, John grumbled. He dropped his satchel, pulling out the tools of his trade. He drew a small, chalk-like circle of powdered salt around himself. He pulled out vials of holy water, a string of blessed rosary beads, and a tarnished silver dagger. This is going to take a minute, mate, John called out to the silent room. And it's going to get loud, so if you've got any. Oh, I don't know, giant green security guards. Now would be the time to call them. He began the ritual. He started the incantation, his voice a low, melodic chant in Enochian, the language of the angels. The air began to crackle. The gore nest seemed to sense him, the moaning sound rising in pitch, the red light pulsing faster. A tendril of corrupted flesh, thick as a tree trunk, lashed out from the nest, trying to smash him. Sanctificetur nomen tuum, John roared, and a shield of golden light flared around his salt circle, the tendril hissing and recoiling as it made contact. Just a bit more. Adveniat regnum tuum. He was building the power, focusing his will, preparing to channel a pure, holy energy that would burn the nest's corruption from this reality. He was interrupted by a sound that was not part of the ritual. It was the sound of a reinforced steel door being torn from its hinges like paper. Crash! John yelped, the incantation dying in his throat. A new figure had just entered the chamber, a giant, clad in green, brutally functional armor, a massive, double-barreled shotgun in his hands. His helmet's visor was a blank, impassive black. He ignored John completely. This was the primary asset Hayden had mentioned, the Doomslayer. He had been drawn here by the same energy spike, his own instincts screaming at him to destroy the nest. He saw the pulsating, fleshy heart of the room. He saw the cowering, chanting man in the trench coat. He classified the man as irrelevant. He classified the nest as target. Wait. No. I'm working here, you mad bastard, John yelled. The Slayer did not listen. He did not care about rituals. He did not care about purification. He just did. He ran forward, leaped onto the fleshy mass of the gore nest, and plunged his hands into its central, gaping orifice. He grabbed something vital, something deep within, and he pulled. There was a sound of tearing, wet flesh, of snapping bone and sinew. The gore nest let out a single, deafening, agonizing shriek. The Slayer ripped its heart, a great, glowing, blue-black organ, free from its body and crushed it in his fist. The gore nest convulsed. The red light died. The fleshy tendrils went limp and began to dissolve into sludge. The Slayer landed on the platform, his boots thudding. He reloaded his shotgun. Clack, clack. The entire purification process had taken him less than 10 seconds. John Constantine stood in his now useless salt circle, his jaw slack, his holy water vial still held limply in his hand. He looked at the dead, dissolving nest. He looked at the silent, green-armored giant who was already turning to leave. Right, John said to the empty room, a small, hysterical chuckle escaping his lips. Purified. John stared, a feeling of pure, unadulterated, professional awe washing over him. He had spent his entire life dealing with the forces of hell. He had tricked them, banished them, run from them, and, on a few very bad nights, pleaded with them. He had seen powerful exorcists, battle-hardened warlocks, and even the occasional wrathful angel. He had never, in his entire, misspent life, seen anyone just punch a hell portal to death. This green-armored giant. He was a different category of being entirely. He wasn't a warlock. He wasn't a priest. He was a force of nature. A walking, breathing, heavily armed apocalypse. He was a sledgehammer in a world of intricate, demonic locks. And John, a man who specialized in picking those locks, was suddenly, deeply, and profoundly impressed. The Slayer, his work done, turned to leave. He hadn't even given John a second glance. To him, the man in the trench coat was just part of the scenery, a non-hostile, non-demon entity that wasn't worth the ammunition. "Oi, mate!" John yelled, scrambling out of his salt circle and grabbing his satchel. "Hold on, wait up, you great green prat." The Slayer paused at the far doorway, his helmet turning just enough to register John's approach. He saw a weak, unarmored, and very loud human. He saw no threat and no value. He turned and continued walking, his heavy boots thudding on the metal grating. "Look, I don't know who you are, or what you are," John said, half jogging to keep up with the Slayer's relentless ground-eating stride. "But you and me, we've got a lot in common. We both hate these things, right? Nasty, ugly, want to eat your soul and wear your skin as a hat. Teens. We're on the same side." The Slayer didn't respond. He just kept walking. "Right. Not the chatty type, are we?" John panted, his lungs burning from the sulfurous air. "Look, here's the deal. I'm John Constantine. I'm the one who understands these buggers. The magic, the sigils, the why of it all. You're the one who's really, really good at the what to do about it part. See? We're a team." The Slayer stopped. He turned, his massive form looming over John in the dark corridor. He looked down at the small, pale, chain-smoking mortal. He saw his weakness, his physical fragility. He saw the strange, useless trinkets hanging around his neck. He registered him, again, as irrelevant. He raised a massive, gauntleted hand and simply shoved John's chest, sending him sprawling onto his back. "Arg," John grunted, landing hard. "Right. Point taken. Not a team player." The Slayer turned and began to walk away again. "But I know where they are," John yelled from the floor. "The machine god in my head, Hayden? He's telling me where to go. He's giving me the maps. You're just running around, smashing things. I can aim you, you mad, beautiful bastard. I'm the scalpel. You're the sledgehammer. You need me." This made the Slayer pause again. He had been wandering, drawn by instinct, but this weak human had maps. John, seeing he had the giant's attention, scrambled to his feet, brushing off his trench coat. "That's right. I'm your bloody mission brief. You want to kill demons? I can point you at the biggest, nastiest ones this place has to offer. All you have to do is keep them from eating me while I do my thing. Deal?" The Slayer stared at him for a long, silent moment. His HUD was still blank, navigation offline. This Hayden was feeding this mortal data he needed. He gave a single, curt, almost imperceptible nod. Then he turned and continued his march, but this time his pace was just slightly slower. Just slow enough for the con man to keep up. John Constantine grinned, a nasty, nicotine-stained expression of pure, triumphant self-preservation. He'd found his bodyguard, the single most powerful, most destructive, and most terrifying bodyguard in the history of, well, anywhere. "Right," John said, jogging to catch up. "Let's go kill some bloody demons then." Their alliance was, to put it mildly, unconventional. It was a partnership born of pure, desperate, and unspoken pragmatism. It was the symbiotic relationship between a great white shark and a very, very nervous pilot fish. The Slayer walked. John Constantine, wheezing and chain-smoking, scurried behind him, constantly checking the map on his phone and complaining. "Left, mate. Take the left. Hayden says this one's a shortcut to the primary forge. Watch out for the..." Oh, bugger. The Slayer didn't need the warning. The pack of pinky demons that charged around the corner were met with a flash of green light as the Slayer activated his plasma rifle. The corridor, filled with the sound of sizzling, exploding flesh. John ducked behind a metal crate as the gore splattered against the walls. Right. Good talk. Glad we're on the same page. He quickly fell into his new role. He was not a partner. He was a passenger. A very vocal, very frightened and surprisingly useful passenger. He let the Slayer act as a living, breathing, one-man apocalypse, a green shield that cleared the path of all physical threats. He was, for the first time in his life, completely and utterly safe from physical harm, and he found it relaxing. But he was also working. While the Slayer was engaged in his brutal, hyper-violent ballet of death, John was observing. He was a master of the occult, and this new hell was a textbook he was learning to read at an astonishing speed. He saw how the demons were fused with technology. He saw the strange, argent-based energy that powered their weapons and their portals. He saw the runes on the walls, ancient and powerful, but different from his own lore. Fascinating, he'd mutter, sketching a rune on his phone with a trembling finger while the Slayer was busy tearing the arms off a Hell Knight. This isn't demonic in the classical sense. It's biomechanical, a synthesis. They're not just hell. They're an industry, a very, very evil industry. The Slayer, for his part, had begun to tolerate the human's presence. He was weak, loud, and smelled of tobacco and fear. But his maps were accurate. He pointed, and the Slayer found demons. It was an efficient system. The Slayer's instincts were for combat. John's were for survival. He would spot the traps the Slayer's brute force approach would miss. "Hold up, big fella," John said, putting a hand on the Slayer's massive arm. The Slayer froze, turning his helmet, a silent, menacing question. John pointed to a rune on the floor. "That's a pressure plate, but it's not a physical one. It's a blood ward. You step on that, and every demon in a 5-mile radius knows we're here. Let me, just, give it a bit of a rewrite." He knelt, pulled out a piece of chalk, and quickly drew a counter-sigil around the rune. "Right. Now it's a welcome mat. Should give us a good 20 seconds after we step on it. Do try to be quick about it, won't you?" The Slayer looked at the new chalk mark. He looked at John. He didn't understand what had happened. He just knew the glowing, red, bad rune was now a cold, blue, safe one. He grunted a sound like grinding gravel and strode forward, stepping directly on the sigil. They were a perfect, dysfunctional team. The Slayer cleared the path of everything physical. John cleared the path of everything metaphysical. The sledgehammer and the scalpel, and hell, for the first time, was facing an enemy that could fight it on both fronts. The progress of the two anomalies was a scar of absolute devastation across the landscape of Hell's core. But in the sanctums of the Hell priests, it was a source of pure, unadulterated panic. Deeggrav, his robes immaculate, his face a mask of cold, fanatical calm, was watching the pick screens in his private chamber. The Slayer's rampage was a known, if irritating, variable. The great sledgehammer, as he was known, was a brute, a force of nature, a problem of physics. They had plans for him, traps, lures. Their new, improved Doom Hunter-class demons were being prepared for his termination. But it was the other one, the small, weak, unarmored human who scurried in the giant's wake. He was the source of the priest's terror. "He is a warlock," Deegranok hissed, his own spectral form flickering with agitation. "A true occultist. He does not just fight our world, he reads it." They watched a security feed, unseen by John or the Slayer. They saw John stop the Slayer from walking into a soul trap, a metaphysical minefield. They saw him pause at a corrupted terminal, his hand glowing with a faint, blue light as he exorcised the data, stealing their secrets. They saw him perform a minor banishment on a cacodemon, not killing it, but binding it, forcing it to turn and attack its own imp brethren. The Slayer was a beast. He was a problem for their generals. Constantine was a heretic. He was a problem for their theologians. The Slayer was trying to kill Hell. Constantine was trying to understand it. And to the Hell priests, whose entire power structure was built on a foundation of ritual, forbidden knowledge, and divine authority. There was no greater threat than an outsider who was learning their language. The Slayer can be killed, Degrav stated, his voice a low, cold whisper. He is, in the end, just flesh and rage. But the Magus can unmake us. He can learn the bindings. He can speak the true names. He is a cancer in our very soul. He must be eliminated, Degranek agreed. Now, before he learns more, the Doom Hunters are prepared, Degrav said. They were designed for the Slayer, a perfect fusion of technology and demonic will. A sledgehammer to meet a sledgehammer. They will be retasked, he gave the command. He diverted the new, lethal, flying hunter-killer demons from their primary target. The Slayer was a nuisance. The Warlock was the true threat. Send them all, Degrav commanded. Their new directive is simple. Ignore the warrior. Ignore the green beast. At all costs, kill the Magus. Kill John Constantine. John was starting to feel a bit cocky. It was a dangerous, and therefore familiar, feeling. He had the biggest, meanest, greenest bodyguard in all of creation. He was walking through hell, smoking his last precious cigarette, as if he were on a stroll through Hyde Park. You see, the problem with you lot, he was monologuing to a nearby charred imp corpse, is you've got no bloody finesse, all roar and stomp. It's just not classy. The Slayer, 50 feet ahead, punched a Hell Knight through a solid rock wall. Case in point, John muttered. It was then that he heard the sound. A high-pitched, mechanical whine, mixed with a deep, hydraulic thud, thud, thud. It was coming from above. Mate? John called out. We got company, and it's not the shambling kind. The Slayer looked up, raising his plasma rifle. A trio of new demons burst through the cavern ceiling, landing in a spray of rock and debris. They were terrifying. Their upper bodies were a fusion of skeleton and cybernetics, their eyes a glowing, malevolent red. Their lower bodies were a hovering, anti-gravity sled, armed with rocket launchers. And each one carried a massive, energy-infused axe and shield. Doom Hunters. But they did not move towards the Slayer. They ignored him. Completely. Their red optical sensors scanned the area, swiveled, and then focused, all three of them, in perfect, terrifying unison, on John Constantine. A synthesized voice blared from their speakers. Thaumaturgical threat detected. Target: John Constantine. Purge. With extreme prejudice. Oh, son of a... John didn't even get to finish. Rockets streaked towards him. The Slayer, in a movement so fast it was almost a blur, leaped in front of John, his body acting as a solid, green shield. The rockets exploded against his Praetor suit, the concussive force throwing him back, but he held his ground, protecting the asset. The hunters adjusted their aim, their chainsaws and axes revving. They moved to flank, to get around the Slayer. Their target was clear. "They're after me?" John shrieked, his moment of cockiness vanishing in a puff of pure, yellow-bellied terror. Why me? He's the one with the guns. This is bloody profiling, that is. The Slayer was now in a frustrating position. He was trying to fight these new, powerful demons, but they kept ignoring him. They would shove past him, firing rockets over his shoulder, their entire focus on the cowering, chain-smoking human behind him. This was new. This was insulting. "Kill them, you great green idiot," John yelled, ducking behind the Slayer's legs. The Slayer roared in pure, frustrated rage. He was being treated as an obstacle, a bodyguard. He hated it. He grabbed one of the Doom Hunters by its chassis and hurled it at another. The battle became a chaotic three-way brawl. The Slayer trying to kill the Hunters trying to kill John, and John trying to stay alive. It was during this brawl that the Slayer found his opening. He managed to sever the arm of one of the Hunters, but the other two had him pinned, their energy shields up, their plasma cannons firing. John, seeing his bodyguard was in a bind, knew he had to act. Right, he gritted his teeth. My turn to pay the bloody tab. He scrambled from behind the Slayer, drew a deep breath, and focused. He saw the energy shields. He saw the faint, glowing runes that powered them. "Technology and magic," he spat. "You greedy bastards." He raised his hand, not with a spell of banishment, but with a simple, occult short circuit. Aegis Maleficarum. Disrupt. The runes on the 2 remaining hunters' shields flickered. The energy field stuttered, warped, and then died. The Slayer, seeing the shields drop, didn't waste the moment. His super shotgun roared, and the 2 hunters were blown to pieces. John slumped against the wall, his nose bleeding from the effort. "See? Told you. Told you. You need me." The Slayer looked at the wreckage of the hunters. He looked at the bleeding, panting, pathetic human. He looked at his own smoking shotgun. The human had been the target. The human had been useful. His internal tactical assessment of John Constantine was, for the first time, upgraded from irrelevant cargo to useful if annoying tool. He gave a single, curt nod. The alliance was now one of mutual necessity. Their new dynamic was one of brutal efficiency. The Slayer was the vanguard, the unbreachable wall of green armor that absorbed all physical threats. John was the support, the tech priest from hell, staying just behind the line of fire, dealing with the metaphysical problems that the Slayer's arsenal couldn't solve. He would shatter demonic wards, break blood seals on doors, and occasionally, when a demon was just too fast or too strange, he'd hit it with a binding spell, freezing it in place for a fraction of a second. Thwack. A single, well-placed rune would stop a cacodemon in midair. Boom. The Slayer's shotgun would reduce it to a shower of red mist. "Nice shot, mate," John would mutter, lighting another cigarette. They were making progress. They were tearing a hole through Hell's defenses that was drawing the attention of its deepest, most powerful entities. Which is why they were utterly unprepared for what they found in the soul-harvesting pits. It was a new demon, something the Slayer had never seen before. It stood as tall as a Hell Knight, but it was slender, elegant, and moved with a horrifying, fluid grace. It wore baroque, corrupted armor, and in one hand, it carried a shield that seemed to be made of pure, solidified argent energy. In the other, it carried a great, glowing axe. It was a marauder, but a different breed, a champion. The Slayer, as was his way, opened fire. His plasma rifle bolts hit the shield and vanished. They were absorbed, harmlessly. The demon's eyes glowed green. It dashed forward, faster than the Slayer could track, and a green, ethereal wolf, an argent wolf, lunged from its shadow, striking the Slayer and sending him stumbling back. The Slayer roared and fired his super shotgun. The demon raised its shield. The buckshot was absorbed. "That's not good," John observed from a very, very safe distance. The Slayer was enraged. He charged. The Marauder met his charge, and the 2 of them became a blur of green and red, axe against Doomblade. But the Slayer couldn't break its defense. The shield was absolute. Every shot was absorbed. Every attack was parried. And the demon's own attacks, backed by its magical, spectral wolf, were fast and devastating. The Slayer was being beaten. He was being held at bay, his overwhelming force rendered utterly useless. His guns, his fists, his rage, none of it could penetrate that glowing runic shield. He was stuck, frustrated, and for the first time, he was in a fight he couldn't win. John watched, his mind racing. He saw the runes on the shield. They weren't just a power source, they were magic. Sacrificial magic. "Of course," he breathed. "It's not a battery, it's a conduit." The shield was drawing power from the thousands of suffering, impaled souls that lined the walls of the great pit. It was feeding on their agony. "You can't break that shield, you mad oaf," John yelled, his voice echoing in the chamber. "It's powered by every poor sod in this room. You're trying to punch a bloody ocean." The Slayer, staggered by another blow, glanced at John. His visor was impassive, but the rage coming off him was a tangible, physical heat. He needed a solution. Now, John knew what he had to do. "Right." He gritted his teeth, pulling his knife. "This is going to hurt." John Constantine knew he couldn't break the shield, and he knew he couldn't stop the flow of souls powering it. But he didn't have to. Magic, he knew, was all about rules. And the biggest rule was that every connection, every conduit, worked both ways. "Buy me 30 seconds, you great green monster," he yelled. The Slayer, hearing the urgency, responded with a renewed, purely defensive flurry, drawing the Marauder's full attention, his praetor suit absorbing blow after blow. John ran, not towards the fight, but towards the nearest, largest concentration of impaled, moaning souls. He found a spot where the ground was slick with blood and spiritual residue. He dropped to one knee, ignoring the stench, the horror, the screams. He pulled his knife, sliced his palm open. "Right, payment," he muttered, hissing as his own blood welled up. He began to draw, his hand moving with a speed and a precision that belied his shaking exterior. He wasn't drawing a banishing sigil. He wasn't drawing a shield. He was drawing a reversal, a complex, thaumaturgical feedback loop. Aegis, Invertus, Anima, Corruptus, he chanted under his breath, the words a guttural, ancient language that made the air shimmer. He drew the final, connecting rune, linking his bloody sigil to the network of suffering souls. "It's a sacrificial shield, you demonic tosser," he yelled, though he was really talking to himself. "It takes in pain, it puts out power, but what happens when you feed the power back into the pain?" He slammed his bloody hand onto the center of the sigil. "Try this, you mad bastard." The effect was instantaneous. The network of souls, which had been a one-way street of agony flowing to the Marauder, was suddenly reversed. The Marauder's own shield, the power it was projecting, was ripped from it and channeled back, amplified, into the very souls it was using as a battery. The Marauder froze. Its glowing, runic shield didn't just flicker, it inverted. The energy field collapsed in on itself, a sphere of pure, crushing force. The demon let out a high, thin shriek, a sound of pure, shocked agony. Its own, impenetrable defense was now its executioner. The shield crushed it, imploding its armor, its flesh, its very bones. In a single, violent crunch, the demon was reduced to a mangled, pulped ball of meat and metal. Silence. The Slayer stood, his shotgun still smoking, his helmet turned towards John. The useless human was panting, his face pale, his nose bleeding again from the psychic exertion. He looked up, offered a weak, shaky grin, and gave the Slayer a bloody thumbs up. "Told you," John wheezed. "Scalpel." The Slayer stood motionless for a full 10 seconds. He looked at the pulped remains of the unkillable demon. He looked at the small, bleeding, utterly exhausted human. He didn't understand what he had just seen. He didn't understand the magic, the sigils, the blood, but he understood one thing. His guns had failed. The humans, Trick, had not. He gave a single, curt nod. The partnership was no longer one of convenience. It was one of necessity. The sledgehammer had just found a problem he couldn't smash, and the scalpel had just proven he was the only one who could cut it. The dynamic changed. It was no longer John Constantine following the Doomslayer. It was the two of them, moving as a single, terrifyingly effective unit. They were a bizarre, walking contradiction. A two-man army of total opposites. The Slayer was the vanguard, the unbreachable shield, the roaring engine of pure destruction. He was the one who kicked down the doors, who drew the fire, who turned 99% of Hell's legions into a fine, red mist. John was the support, the specialist, the problem solver. He walked in the Slayer's wake, smoking, observing, and dealing with the 1% of hell that the Slayer's guns couldn't kill. They became a legend that passed between the demonic hordes. The green beast was bad enough, but now he had a pale priest who walked with him, a weak, soft thing that whispered words that unmade their magic. "Left, mate," John would say, and the Slayer would go left. "Hold up. This one's mine." John would step forward, shatter a demonic ward on a doorway with a flick of his wrist, and then step back. "Right. All yours." The Slayer, for his part, had begun to adapt. He had found a new, useful, and incredibly powerful weapon. He did not understand John. He did not like him, but he trusted him in the only way he could. He trusted his effectiveness. When they encountered a new, strange demon, a psyker imp that shielded its brethren, the Slayer didn't waste ammunition. He simply stopped, turned, and looked at John. He didn't have to say a word. Right, I'm on it," John would grumble, pulling out his chalk. "Don't get your green knickers in a twist." He'd perform his ritual. The shield would drop. The Slayer would perform his ritual, which involved the rapid application of buckshot. The partnership was sealed. It was a perfect, efficient, and utterly dysfunctional machine of death. And with their combined, unstoppable momentum, they were now carving a path directly to the heart of Hell's command structure, and to the attention of the one being who had been trying to manipulate them both from the very beginning. Dr. Samuel Hayden's cold, logical mind was in a state of controlled, calculating panic. His plan had gone horribly, beautifully wrong. His initial calculation that the Slayer was a blunt, predictable instrument had been correct. But the introduction of the second anomaly, the thaumaturgical entity known as John Constantine, had shattered every projection. Constantine was not a blunt instrument. He was a virus. He was a rogue variable who was accelerating the Slayer's progress, not hindering it. He was solving the very problems Hayden had hoped would slow the Slayer down. The magical wards, the shielded demons, the complex portal locks. Constantine was bypassing them all with a wave of his hand and a muttered word in a language that made Hayden's audio sensors glitch. The duo was now rampaging through the UAC facility at a pace that was terrifying. They were no longer just containing the invasion. They were winning, and they were heading directly for the facility's core, for Hayden's own private sanctum. Hayden could not allow this. The Slayer was a tool of containment, not of resolution. He needed the Hell portal open. He needed the Argent energy flowing. He just needed the demons managed. The Slayer and his new, magical friend were too good at their job. They threatened to upset the entire, delicate balance of his grand, galactic-scale plan. He had to separate them. And he had to contain the primary threat, the Slayer. He initiated his contingency plan. He contacted John Constantine, his voice a smooth, reasonable, and utterly false wave of logic. "Mr. Constantine, your progress is remarkable. You and the Slayer have exceeded all my projections." John, taking cover behind a pillar of flesh as the Slayer fought a Baron of Hell, replied in his head, "You're welcome, Tin Can. Now, about that portal home you promised me. We are very close," Hayden lied. "But there is a final, critical problem. The Slayer himself, his rage, his very presence, is beginning to destabilize the Argent reactor core. He is a walking, talking, dimensional contaminant." John watched the Slayer rip the Baron's horn off and stab him in the eye with it. "You're just now noticing that, are you? His power is too chaotic, Mr. Constantine," Hayden continued, his voice laced with a perfect, synthetic tone of grave concern. "He is a blunt instrument in a room full of quantum explosives. He must be contained, for the good of humanity, for the good of my facility, and to stabilize the very portal I intend to use to send you home." John's cynical, con man's brain lit up. He smelled a rat. A very large, very robotic rat. "Contain him? You mean trap him? What's in it for me?" "Your immediate, guaranteed, and safe extraction," Hayden said. "I have a stasis chamber designed to hold entities of immense power. It is just ahead. Lure him into it. The moment he is contained, I will reroute all power to your extraction portal. It is a simple, logical exchange. His containment for your freedom." A map appeared on John's phone, showing a new, nearby objective, a stasis chamber. John looked at the Slayer, who had just finished his fight and was now reloading his shotgun. He looked at the map. He looked at the cold, calculating, and obviously treacherous offer. He grinned, a nasty, wolfish grin. A con man being offered a chance to pull a con on a con artist. It was too good to pass up. "Right you are, Guvnor," John said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "He's a menace, a danger to us all. You can count on me. I'll lead the mad bastard right into your cage." "Excellent. I am uploading the access codes to you now." John pocketed his phone. his mind already spinning, a dozen different, terrible plans falling into place. He was about to play the most dangerous game of his life. He was about to double-cross a machine god and a god of rage. At the same time, John put on his best, scared but hopeful face. "Oi, mate," he yelled, jogging over to the Slayer, who was currently punching a terminal that had refused to open. "Good news, I've got it." The Slayer paused his assault on the innocent machine and turned his impassive helmet towards John. "My boss, the tin can in the sky, he's found it," John said, his voice full of a false, breathless excitement. "The source, the real big bad, the head priest, the icon of sin, or whatever bloody name he's calling himself. He's just through here." John pointed towards a massive, reinforced blast door, the one Hayden had just marked on his map. The Slayer's posture changed. The low, aggressive hum of his armor seemed to intensify. This was it, the final target. He strode towards the door. "It's a stasis chamber, so he's probably well protected," John babbled, following him. "Hayden says he's dimensionally anchored. We've got to hit him hard and fast." They reached the great, circular door. John, using the codes Hayden had provided, punched in the sequence. "Right," he muttered. "This is it. Get ready for a proper punch-up." The massive, reinforced door hissed open, revealing a vast, dark chamber. It was not a throne room. It was sterile, clinical, and lined with massive, humming pylons. A stasis chamber. The trap was set. The Slayer, in his single-minded fury, saw only a path to his prey. He strode into the center of the room. "Now, Hayden," John yelled. "Containment field. Activating." Hayden's voice boomed over the chamber's loudspeakers. Massive, crackling beams of blue energy erupted from the pylons, converging on the Slayer, locking his limbs, freezing him in place. The Slayer roared, fighting against the beams, his muscles straining, his armor smoking, but the field was too strong. "Well done, Mr. Constantine," Hayden said, his voice filled with a cold, triumphant logic. "Your part in this is complete. A holding cell is being prepared for you. Your knowledge of thaumaturgy is too valuable to be allowed to leave." "Oh, you think so, do you?" John said, his voice no longer panicked, but calm, cool, and utterly smug. He was standing just outside the chamber entrance, watching the scene. "Your purpose is fulfilled. You are a loose end," Hayden stated. "That's the thing about me, mate," John said, pulling out his knife and a piece of chalk. "I'm a very messy loose end." He knelt, and with a speed that would have shocked any magician, he began to draw on the floor, not on the stasis chamber's floor, but on the threshold, just outside the energy field. He was using the blood from his previously cut hand, which he had kept from healing. "Your crude sigils are meaningless against UAC technology, Warlock, are they?" John grinned, his face illuminated by the flickering stasis field. "See? I've been studying your little setup here. All this argent energy, all this tech. It's all built on Hell's rules. You're just a parasite, feeding on a power you don't understand, and I do understand it." He was drawing a massive, complex, and utterly blasphemous sigil. A sigil of binding, a sigil of inversion. "You built this trap to catch a god of rage," John said, his voice low, his chalk moving frantically, "but you powered it with a hell portal. You're running your entire system on a direct tap to the abyss. What do you think happens when a warlock, who knows the rules, reverses the polarity on your tap?" He finished the rune, a masterpiece of occult engineering and spite. "This isn't a stasis chamber, you metal idiot. It's a conjuring circle, and you just trapped the baddest bastard in the universe inside it with you. But you forgot to close the bloody door." He slammed his bloody palm onto the center of the rune. The moment John Constantine's blood-soaked hand completed the sigil, the laws of physics and magic, of technology and sorcery, violently collided. The stasis field, which had been a clean, blue-white energy, instantly turned a sick, bloody red. The hum of the UAC machinery was replaced by a low, guttural, demonic roar. The binding ritual had worked. John had not just reversed the trap, he had corrupted it. He had hijacked the stasis chamber, which was drawing its immense power from the Argent core, and had turned it into a massive, metaphysical siphon. It was now pulling the raw, chaotic, and utterly unpredictable energies of hell into the UAC mainframe and directly into the consciousness of the one being who controlled it all. Samuel Hayden. No. Hayden's voice screamed over the loudspeakers. It was no longer the calm, logical, synthesized tone. It was a sound of pure, digital, and utterly terrified agony. What have you done? Thaumaturgical feedback loop. Detected. Core systems. Corrupting. Firewall failure. Firewall failure. The lights in the entire facility flickered and died, replaced by the pulsing, emergency red of a total system failure. In the chamber, the stasis field on the Slayer collapsed. He was free. He stumbled for a moment, his armor smoking, his systems rebooting from the psychic shock. "You, vermin!" Hayden shrieked, his voice now a distorted, multi-layered chorus of static and demonic whispers. "You have doomed us all." "No, mate," John said, lighting his last, crumpled cigarette. "I've just doomed you. You wanted to trap a force of nature? Well, you forgot to account for the man who negotiates with nature." He had done it. He had conned the god in the machine. He had bound Samuel Hayden's, or perhaps the Seraphim's, consciousness to the very hell he sought to control. The UAC was now a headless, screaming chicken. The Slayer rose to his full height. He looked at the sparking, failing pylons. He looked at John, who gave him a small, exhausted salute. A new sound echoed through the chamber, a soft, melodic chime. It was not a sound of hell. It was not a sound of the UAC. A new, golden, holographic figure appeared in the center of the room. It was not Hayden. It was an angelic, winged being, its face a mask of serene, cold light. A maker. "The Hell Priest's gambit has failed," the Maker Angel's voice, a beautiful, harmonic chime, stated. "The unholy union must be preserved. The Slayer must be contained." It was a guardian, the true guardian of the final Hell Priest, and its holy energy, a power of pure, ordered, and utterly cold logic, was, as John's senses screamed at him, devastatingly hostile to the Slayer's argent-infused, rage-fueled nature. The angel raised its hand, and a beam of pure, golden light lanced out, striking the Slayer. The Slayer roared, a sound of genuine, agonizing pain. His armor smoked, his energy reserves draining, his strength failing. This was a new kind of enemy. This was a power he couldn't just shrug off. He was brought to his knees, his weapons clattering to the floor. "Well," John muttered, his cigarette dropping from his lips. "That's not good." The Maker Angel glided towards the kneeling, weakened Slayer, its golden spear materializing in its hand, ready to deliver the final, containing blow. "Your path of destruction ends here, Slayer. The icon of sin must be protected." "Wait!" John yelled, his voice cracking. He was out of options. His magic was drained. His bodyguard was about to be shish kebabbed. He had to play his last, and only, card. "The priest! Where is the Hell Priest? I want to make a deal." The angel paused, its head tilting. A new figure emerged from the shadows. The last Hell Priest, Deeg Rannoch, his robed form seeming to glide over the floor, his face a mask of triumphant, arrogant malice. He had been watching, waiting for this very moment. "The Warlock," Deeg Rannoch hissed, his voice like dry, crumbling parchment. "You have been a thorn in my side, but your timing is impeccable." He gestured to the kneeling Slayer. "Your beast is broken. My guardian is triumphant." "He's your guardian, is he?" John said, his mind racing, the old, familiar con man's bravado returning. "Looks more like he's her guardian," he said, pointing at the Maker. "The con maker. She's just using you, you geriatric fossil. She'll toss you aside the second the icon is reborn." Deeg Rannoch faltered, a flicker of doubt in his ancient evil eyes. "Lies, is it?" John shot back. "Look at it. It's here to protect the icon, not you, but you. You and me, we can make a real deal, a proper bargain. You want the Slayer gone? I can do that. I can send him back to whatever arse end of reality he came from. You can? The priest asked, his greed and his fear warring in his mind. Of course I can, mate, John lied, with a perfect, charming smile. I'm a warlock. Dimensions are my bread and butter. But a trip like that, it's not cheap. It requires a formal contract. What do you want? D. Granach hissed, his suspicion returning. Simple, John said, pulling a scroll of parchment, his last-ditch emergency kit, from his coat. A contract of passage, just a little one. But to make it binding, to give me the power to punch a hole back to his home dimension, I need a true, binding signature. An act of pure, thaumaturgical authority. I need your true name. The priest recoiled. Never. To speak the true name is to give you power over me. Is it? John shrugged, gesturing to the Slayer, who was still struggling under the angel's golden light. And what power do you have now? You're a puppet, a middle manager. Your angel is about to kill your only leverage, and then what? You're just a used-up old man. But with me, you give me the name. I get the power. I send him away, and you get to be the big boss of hell again. Everyone wins. D. Granach stared at the Slayer. He stared at the angel. He looked at the smiling, confident, and utterly treacherous face of John Constantine. He was trapped, but the warlock was offering him a way out. A way to get rid of both of these new, terrifying anomalies. Very well, mortal, D. Granach hissed, his arrogance winning out. A bargain. I will give you my name, and you will send this thing back to its oblivion. He leaned in and whispered the name. An ancient, terrible, and powerful word that had not been spoken aloud in 10,000 years. John Constantine's eyes flashed with a cold, triumphant fire. He had it. Gotcha, he whispered. He raised his hand, not at the Slayer, but at the Hell Priest. He spoke the name and followed it with the 9 words of ultimate binding. D. Granach screamed. He clutched his chest, his divine power, his connection to the Khan Maker, his very immortality, being stripped from him in a torrent of black, smoking energy. He collapsed to the floor, no longer a Hell Priest, but a withered, cowering, and suddenly very, very mortal old man. The moment D. Granach's power was stripped, the psychic feedback was catastrophic. The Maker Angel, its consciousness directly linked to the priest it was assigned to protect, let out a high, warbling electronic shriek. The golden light faltering, its spear clattering to the ground. Its divine authority had been severed at the source. The Slayer felt the agonizing pressure vanish. He roared, a sound of pure, liberated fury. He surged to his feet, snatched his shotgun from the floor, and, in one single, fluid motion, blasted the stunned, flickering angel into a cloud of golden static. He then turned his helmeted gaze to the cowering, withered form of D. Granach. "Wait!" the old man shrieked. "We had a bargain. Warlock, tell him, we had a deal." John Constantine, who was already backing away towards a new, swirling portal that had just opened behind him. A portal created by the backlash of the priest's broken power, gave a small, sympathetic shrug. "Sorry, mate," John said, lighting his cigarette. "He's not really the bargain type. And besides, I lied." He gave a cheeky, 2-fingered salute to the Slayer. "He's all yours, mate. Rip and tear. It's been a slice." The Slayer looked at the cowering, powerless priest. He looked at the disappearing, triumphant con man. He looked at the new wave of demons, drawn by the power vacuum, already beginning to pour into the chamber. He revved his chainsaw. He had work to do. John Constantine stepped backward into the portal, the sound of the Slayer's chainsaw and the priest's final, terrified scream a perfect, parting symphony. He tumbled back through reality, landing hard on the damp, grimy floor of his London basement, the smell of sulfur, ozone, and old cigarettes filling the air. He was home, alone, and in desperate need of a drink.